Welcome back to the channel. I am Stuart and I am your middle-aged hack. Just a child of the 80s trying to make it through life in the 20s. Today's video is all about retro gaming. I started getting interested in retro gaming, it must have been 10 years ago, but there were a lot of things that I really didn't want to deal with. You had to configure everything yourself, and at the time it just didn't seem like a good deal. Well, a former coworker of mine was telling me that he built an arcade cabinet himself, and I kind of got interested in that. And then it seemed like a year or so ago, you started hearing about, kind of retro consoles coming back, and there was a lot of emulation that was going on, but these things were more money than I really wanted to pay. And they seemed kind of limited. There was one that, just played Atari 2600 games, and then there was another one that just played Commodore 64 games. So once again, I kind of let it go. And then I found out there's a version of Linux called Bosera that lets you install it on pretty much any old computer, and you can play old video games on it. That began to interest me because I had an old computer and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. So I tried that out, and it looked pretty good, except the next question was, where do you get all these old games? And that's where I need to take a little bit of a detour and kind of go through that. Right now, the way that copyright is designed, copyright will last for like 75 years after the death of the original owner in some cases, or if it's a corporation, 75 years after it's created, something like that. I'm sure someone's going to leave a comment clarifying that for me, and I appreciate it. So what that means is that all these old video games from the 70s and 80s, they're still under copyright, 100%. And you can go out on the internet. There are plenty of places to find it, and I'm not going to tell you where because I don't want this to get taken down and have my channel shut down before I begin. But there are plenty of places you can go out and find the code for these old video games in a simple file. They're called ROMs. And like I said, if you search for them, you will find them. The question is, where are you going to find them? There are some really kind of sketchy, skeevy places you can find things, and I really didn't want to be a part of that. So I didn't know where to get all these old games. And I also didn't know if it was even legal for me to get them, which I don't think it is. I don't think it's really legal to download something off the internet or even to buy something that has all this old copyrighted stuff if you're sure that it's not being licensed. And if you're going to get into retro gaming, you're going to have to come to terms with whether or not you're feeling comfortable with that. It's a real kind of ethical question. A lot of these games, nobody is making money on them anymore. Sometimes the companies are out of business, or there's just no licensing being done on them. So it's, in the sense, it's kind of fair use because nobody is making money off this stuff, and you're not going to try to make money off of it by selling it, so it's not hurting anything. On the other hand, it's illegal, and like I said, you have to decide where you stand on that. I'm still not sure where I stood on it, but I'm going to tell you the rest of my journey. I didn't know where to get a lot of these games, so I had an idea. I thought, okay, well, I'd see if I could find something I could buy that had a lot of these games, and then see if I could just use them on my laptop that I'd put Bosera on. I did a bit of research, and I found what I thought was going to be the best option for me. And it's this. This is the R36s. I tell you who manufactures it, except I really don't know. It's available through AliExpress on a dozen different sellers, and most of them don't give any sort of brand name at all. So no one exactly has any idea who makes this thing. You can usually find it for about 40 bucks, And it will come with between 5,000 and 10,000 games on it from different consoles and arcade games and tons and tons of stuff. I bought one of these for that purpose. And initially, that's all I used it for, was I took the ROMs off of it and I started using them on my laptop. And then I kind of got into the console itself. That was about 6 months ago. I want to do a little bit of a review of this console. You're going to find plenty of reviews of it online, but this is how I feel about it after 6 months as just kind of a casual gamer. This thing is a frickin' blast. If you like games from the 80s and 90s, this is basically a dream come true. This is every game you could think of, from pretty much arcades to like consoles like the NES, Super NES, Genesis, even Neo Geo, and you know, it will play these games faithfully. It will do them really well. It will even let you save the game and rewind it, which is amazing because it lets you finish games that you'd never be able to finish otherwise. And did I mention the price? So I really did like it. There's a lot to like, but when you watch reviews of this little console, a lot of people are going to tell you stuff that is not true, or at least I didn't find it to be true, and other people are going to give you kind of a negative opinion of it and what you might need to do. I'm going to walk you through my experience, what I liked, what I didn't like about it. First of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room on the build quality. The build quality of this console is maybe not incredibly great. The buttons on the back are a little stiff. The buttons on the front are a little gummy. The joysticks are a little imprecise. And the whole thing doesn't look like it could survive much of a drop of more than a foot or two onto a hard surface. And I'm just fine with that, because I'm not planning on dropping it on a hard surface. And the controls aren't great, but I don't care. There's a lot of snobs out there who are going to tell you that, oh, you know, you'll hate playing it because the buttons are too gummy, or you'll keep people up with the buttons on the back. No, you know what? It's just fine. I enjoy it. It works as well as I want it to work. I'm not interested in, you know, tournament level Street Fighter. I just want to play a little Tempest or a little Dig Dug. And, you know, it works great. It really does for that. So don't listen to anybody on the internet who says that the console is no good for you, or that you're going to hate it because it's not the perfect thing in the world. I want to talk about the games that are available on it. I've already discussed the idea that they may or may not be licensed or legal. You have to guess for under $40 they're not. And you have to decide, like I said, what that means to you and where you're going to go with that next. However, if you are going to use this console, you will need to replace the micro SD cards that come with it. There's actually two of them, one on this side and one on that side. You don't have to use both. You could get one big card that, you know, you only put in one side. But, you know, the way it comes is usually with two SD cards. So that's kind of what I did. You're going to want to buy new SD cards before you even play with this thing. You know, the reviews are 100% right on this. The SD cards that come with it are garbage, which is pretty much what you would expect from something at this price level. But go out and buy, I only recommend the Samsung Evo SD cards. You know, other people have said this is good or that is good, but these are the ones that have worked for me. Get them, and they come with an adapter that takes them up to full-size SD. If you need something for your computer that reads SD cards, you can get that on AliExpress or Amazon for under $5 usually. It doesn't matter which one you buy, they're all pretty good. There's a free program called Rufus, R-U-F-U-S, that lets you clone SD cards very easily. So you're going to want to get that. It's totally free. Just look on the internet for it. And where it's going to look a little confusing at first, just follow the steps. All you need to do is learn to clone an SD card. It's not hard. And do that right away before you even start. Then you'll be ready to play. And when you play, well, you're gonna find that maybe about a quarter of the games don't seem to work. And that's true for everybody. And most of the games that don't work or don't work well are the late 90s to mid 2000s games that come with it. There's no business that this console would have running games that new. They simply they don't work. Sometimes they don't launch at all. And sometimes they launch, but they're really jerky. If you want something that's going to play games from your PlayStation or PS2 or something like that, get something else. This isn't the one for you. If you're more into that Super NES generation, then you're going to love this. Some of the Super NES generation games won't run. That is true. There are ways that you can get around that. You can launch RetroArc, which is the software that does all the emulation. You can launch that directly right from the main menu. And from there, you can load and set different options and things like that that are going to maybe let those games play that they wouldn't have played before. And so far, I've yet to find a game that I couldn't make play at some level. They didn't necessarily all play very well, but I could make them all play at some level. If you're interested in learning more about RetroArc, I'll put something in the description that gives you a link to that. But that's not really what this is about. It's about this console and why you would get this and why you would like this as much as I have. It has, there's a lot to like about it. You can actually hook up an external joystick to it. The charging is very easy, but I'll get to that in a minute. It has a headphone jack, but it does not have HDMI out. Some of these listings will say it does, and it doesn't. It does not have built-in Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. Some of the listings will say it does, but it doesn't. But you can generally get a very cheap Wi-Fi adapter that works very well with it, not expensive at all. Even if you go through a couple of them trying to figure out which one that you get, it's still not going to cost you more than 20 bucks. And so if you think about the device and the cards, and if you're interested in it, a Wi-Fi adapter, well, then you're still all in for under about 80 bucks, which is amazing. I'm absolutely just mind-blowing for what you get for this console. The next thing I want to talk about is the operating system. The operating system itself is an open source operating system called AROS. That makes it different from some of the other consoles you'll see out there that come with their own launcher that you really can't change too much. AROS is totally open source. You can modify it any way you want. You can even get the source code and write anything that you want into it. That's up to you. The R36s comes with an older version of AROS that's from 2022, but it works great. And if you're not into fiddling, then you don't have to change things up. If you are, however, well, there's a newer version of AROS. You can download it all, flash it onto a fresh micro SD card, or like I said, you can hook up a Wi-Fi adapter and download just the updated changes. That's up to you. The newer versions seem to be a little bit more stable. They put in a little bit more functionality, but if you're happy with what you've got, it's not like there's a security issue here. If this thing doesn't connect to the internet, it's not going to do you any harm to have an older version of an operating system out there. It's just not a problem. It's not a problem at all. I want to talk about one thing that I did do, and I changed this within the settings because this is completely up to you. But I don't like it when my games are stretched. I don't like it when, a game that's supposed to be vertical in the arcade, it ends up being stretched all the way to fit a horizontal screen. I didn't like that. So what you need to do is you need to go into the RetroArc settings, and you'll find them just by scrolling down until you find RetroArc. And it takes a second to get to. So then you go into RetroArc and at that point you'll be presented with the RetroArc menu. You can go into the settings and into video and into scaling, and then change aspect ratio to core provided. then back out, and you're going to need to save your settings. It's not going to save them for you. You need to go into Configuration File and choose Save Current Configuration. If you don't do this, it's not going to keep it. So do that, and then all of your vertical games are going to play vertical. All of your Game Boy games are going to play square. Personally, that's how I like to see it. If you want to see things fill the screen, that's totally up to you. That's the nice thing about this console being, totally open source and customizable. You can do almost anything you want to do with it. If you are the kind of person who wants to source ROMs on the internet, you can do a lot more with this system than just what it comes with. You can play Atari 2600 games, you can play actually the entire Atari 8-bit line is available to it. I've even heard of some people porting DOS games onto it. There's something called Portmaster, which lets you run games that have been recompiled to run the thing. And there's just no end to what you can do. But just remember, if you're going to try to source ROMs online, you might run into some places that are a little bit sketchy. And I wouldn't necessarily do it on your work laptop, because you never know what you're going to pick up when you pick up a ROM as well. I'm perfectly happy with what's on there, and I didn't see a need to do that, honestly, because it just kind of, everything that's there just works for me. So the last big thing I want to talk about here is, how did this thing get to be so cheap? I mean, think about it. If you were building a system like this, then to run all these games, not even counting the ROMs and stuff like that and the cost of that intellectual property, you might spend a couple of $100 pretty easy. And this thing's under 40 bucks. And for 40 bucks, you get a high resolution screen and passable joysticks and buttons and stuff like that, and even a replaceable battery. The system is so cheap, you got to wonder how they have done it. I've done a little bit of research, and this is the best that I can figure out. The best thing that I can figure out is they took a board, which they're probably manufacturing for about $1 a piece, that's based on a simple reference design. They didn't have to really do much with it except for maybe redesign it a little bit to fit the case they want. They took an older processor that they're probably getting for $1. This is based on an old rock chip processor, and it's nowhere near current, despite the fact that the listings will make it seem super powerful. It's a much older processor. They took what seemed to be like spare parts, screens and stuff that maybe came from other things that weren't used anymore, and they bought big surplus lots of them, which is why you'll find that some of them seem to have brighter screens than others. No way to tell what you're going to get, but they're all pretty good. They're all, and for the money, they're all great. But so they've got a lot of parts that are just surplus parts. They took what seems to be a very unpopular battery to use, and so that means they're probably also getting it pretty cheap. They wrapped it up all with some standard parts, the buttons, the joysticks, and stuff like that, and put it in a case that, yeah, they probably had to create the tooling, but who cares? It probably cost them 30 cents to make the case. And all things considered, they're probably, it probably cost them about $3 to make this whole thing. They're selling it for 40, which usually includes shipping from AliExpress. And so everybody's happy. You get something at a great price, and they get a decent profit. Fantastic, right? There's the other thing, though, is, well, what about all the programming? You can't ignore the fact that this is based on open source software. Open source software, as everybody knows, is something that people just create because they feel good about it. Sometimes it's funded by corporations that feel like it's philanthropic to do it. But either way, open source software, the point of it is that if you admit that you're doing it, if you admit it's open source software in a particular way, you can use it for free. And everything on here, with the exception of the ROMs, is open source. The operating system that uses AROS is developed by some really dedicated people. And it's free for them to use. The menuing system called Emulation Station is developed by another group of people, and it's free to use. The emulators that have been built over the years, probably hundreds of people have worked on them, and none of them have gotten paid. So the company, whoever they are that's making this thing, they're not paying for any of the software. So that's another cost they don't have to worry about. They're probably not paying for the ROMs. So that's another thing. And what it boils down to is a very low price. Then you kind of ask yourself, are they sourcing it, ethically? Is this thing being put together by 4-year-olds in a factory in the middle of China? I prefer not to think about it. I prefer to kind of think that most of this assembly is done by machines, robots, and probably very little of it is done by humans. And I'm hoping that the humans are humanely treated. And the truth is, I don't know. And just like you, I try not to think about that when I'm buying something made in China. The bottom line here, folks, if you are looking for a great retro gaming experience that will play all the games that you used to spend tons and tons of quarters and tons of money playing, this is a great thing for you. You do not have to worry about some of the reviews online that say, oh, it's not good enough, because it is good enough, especially for the price. You don't have to worry that you're going to have to spend a lot of time updating it, because you don't. You can use it right out of the box and it's fine. But if you want to tinker with it, you can. It's just a nice device for something like that. And I have to say, for what it does, I couldn't be happier. It brings me back to the days when I was younger, had a bit more hair, and just maybe enjoyed some things about life. It's time that just makes me smile. And you can't put a price tag on that. Even if you did, it wouldn't be that much money. That's it for today's video. Remember, please do like and subscribe. I'm trying to make sure that this channel gets up to the point where I can monetize it as quickly as possible. So when you do that, it helps me out a lot. I'm going to put some resources in the description to some places you can learn more about the R36s. It's available on AliExpress. I'm not going to give you a link to it because prices change all the time. There's tons of different vendors who sell it. But look on AliExpress. Don't bother buying it through Facebook or TikTok and paying twice the price. It's not worth it. That's all for the channel for today. Hope you have a great one.